So?
I don't know, shouldn't the lyrics touch on the actual theme of the podcast?
Are you kidding me? They do.
No, the podcast is about my burgeoning career as an artist. It's not a men's empowerment podcast.
Have you listened to it?
Yeah.
It is about the struggles of the modern man who happens to be creative. Like the meat of it is anyway. The rest of it's just you kind of spiraling and like just kind of talking in circles and never really arriving to a point. It's just like a lot of like it probably could be shorter.
I mean, I guess that's been part of it, but I don't want to paint myself into a corner. You're kind of laying it on thick. Beacon, did I hear Beacon in the Night?
Yeah.
It's kind of Batman for me, I feel like.
It's Batman adjacent, sure, but
I don't want to be Batman.
Don't be stupid. You are not the Joker. You're like an antidote to nihilism.
I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be either of those. I mean, I guess I'm, maybe I am trying to position myself as a healthier alternative to manosphere influencers, but I'm not doing that in like a DC kind of way.
Alex, every episode is about you trying to become the man that you wish you had access to when you were 22. All right? This is serious business. We need to wipe the slate clean. Okay, we need to restore the integrity of the project.
I don't know. I'm still on the fence about whether the AI stuff actually compromised my integrity.
What a fucking... Just send me your final notes by the end of the day. All right? And then that'll be the last pass.
Last pass?
Yeah. And then I'll send you a WAV file after we sort out the terms to a royalty and usage agreement.
Royalty? What do you think this is? I mean, like...
It's a beginning. It's a beginning to something monumental for young men across the country. And I've got 30 minutes before I go to the dentist. We can listen to it again.
And that was a conversation I had at a studio playback with actor Jonathan Pawlowski, who you may recall played Marcel in an old reenactment that I self-directed that explored my deeply unnecessary relationship with Marcel, the maintenance man at my old apartment. Long story short, Jonathan texted me a couple weeks ago. I assumed he wanted to reprise his role as Marcel, but I didn't have any more reenactments on the books. I don't have new Marcel material because I haven't really been seeing Marcel. For one, I moved. I don't live in that complex anymore. I'm not readily accessible to him. I'm out of his orbit. But I think the more decisive factor was probably the fact that he patched things up with his wife. I guess she finally opted out of the 4B movement, and they've settled into a bi-monthly missionary sex arrangement. And I guess he's or maybe happy isn't the word, but he is fully reintegrated into domestic life. So yeah, he doesn't need me as an accountability partner in the NoFap next year challenge that he was planning. But anyway, no, Jonathan was not about reprising that role. He wanted to meet up and talk music and ethics. I guess he suspected correctly that I was using AI-generated music in the podcast, and I admitted to it, but I explained that they're provisional tracks, they're placeholders. I've been trying to get my half-brother Rowan to make me a permanent theme song for months, but he's been feeding me the same old BS he always does. He says you can't rush creativity, especially when it's in service of something you don't believe in. And I guess Rowan caught wind that I had started releasing episodes and that I was using placeholder AI-generated music because he started distancing himself even more than he usually does. It's pretty much impossible to make contact with him now. Rowan. Yeah, they're both pretty disappointed in me, I guess. And I guess I just didn't realize how controversial that would be using AI filler. But, when Jonathan and I met up, there was this heavy look in his eyes, like I had betrayed him. And he said something to the effect of using AI generated music makes you less of an artist than you have it in you to be. And I didn't think much of that at the time. But when he said less of an artist, I'm pretty sure what my nervous system heard was less of a man. My posture changed. I think I beat my chest at one point. Puffed it out a bit. Dominance display behavior stuff. It's embarrassing. And, I started to think maybe Jonathan was onto something in terms of this podcast's early episodes being less about my art than I initially thought and more to do with how I've been justifying my approach to modern masculinity. And then I started thinking, what if it's not just the podcast? What if all my creative outlets have been implicated by this false equivalence between artistry and manhood? Because, underneath it all, I'm a writer. Everything else comes later. The audio-visual stuff is a way of dressing up the prose and the poetry for self-publication. And I'm pretty primal about my writing. The first drafts, anyway. So I'm thinking that may be where the conflation is coming from. I tend to follow Dennis Johnson's approach. Write naked, write in blood, write in exile. So for me, a first draft isn't so much a performance as it is an expedition. I disappear into the untamed parts of my psyche to hunt for wild things, ideas, notions, feelings, and then I drag those back to process, clean them up and package them, and then release them into the town square, i.e. YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, etc. So yeah, the AI tracks just felt like off-the-rack clothes that I was using to doll up the work for polite society, if that makes sense. It didn't feel like I was outsourcing part of my artistic journey because, as far as I was concerned, I had already gone on the journey as a writer. But then on the other hand, in using those tracks, I wasn't commissioning or honoring anyone else's journey, and that's probably what rubbed Jonathan and Rowan the wrong way. And ultimately, I'm glad they were rubbed the wrong way because the whole ordeal has exposed that somewhere along the line, I fused my artistic identity with my masculine identity so seamlessly that I somehow accepted the equation that good artist equals good man, which is obviously not the case. History has produced brilliant artists that are pieces of shit. And it's all worth looking into, especially if Jonathan's right and this has been a men's podcast the whole time. I should probably know whether or not I'm an integrated man at all if I'm accidentally convincing a handful of men online that I have things figured out. I don't. So let's get into it. How did this happen? First off, we should recognize that most Western men today have to initiate themselves, and that's because old pathways like multi-generational households, guilds, apprenticeships, sustained mentorships by older men, those have either weakened or disappeared altogether. And yeah, if you don't read as much as I do, if you've never picked up Iron John by Robert Bly, for instance, you may not notice anything's missing unless you get the chance to mature enough to admit that you're lost. Then again, I think you can read Iron John too early, too. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. I read it in my teens when I had just started to lean on creativity as a way to distinguish myself. And I guess my reading comprehension wasn't what it is today, and I unconsciously mapped my creative aspirations onto it. I decided that my initiation as a man, as I understood it in the book, was going to be art at the exclusion of all else. And fast forward to now, this is where that idea of integration landed me. Yeah, I guess healthy adults don't conflate artistic integrity and masculine integration as much as I did. My art and my masculinity have been sharing the same scoreboard. If you strip away cultural specifics, an initiated man isn't somebody who grows a nice beard or, deadlifts twice his body weight or starts a self-confrontational podcast. It's just somebody you can trust to leave the safety of the village, disappear into uncertainty, and then come back with something the tribe didn't have before. So basically, contribution is the common denominator. All right, so hunter brings the meat, farmer, he's got the harvest, explorer, map, artist, beauty, escapism, meaning, I don't love it written out like that, but yeah, that's pretty much what I bring to the table. I bring vertical videos that get shown to about 300 strangers before the algorithm puts a cap on distribution. All of that was oversimplified. Admittedly, vision is probably a more appropriate term than meaning. I don't think artists have a monopoly on meaning. And yeah, I think escapism is probably too broad. There's a difference between escaping from reality, a la doom scrolling, and using imagination to expand your reality. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people get hung up on labeling their contribution. You know, nobody wants to believe that their calling is just making margaritas. So you see a lot of bartenders becoming mixologists. You see a lot of salesmen call themselves growth consultants. I'm going by podcaster right now. You know, I'm not immune to this little dance. But in the end, your contribution should be far more than a job title. People shouldn't really be able to put it into words. You know, it's how you bring your unique gifts into relationship with the world and shoulder your share of the burden of being human. Yeah, basically carrying your weight your way. And anyway, for a man, the point isn't what you bring back from the wilderness. The point is that you went there in the first place. And that's what people like Jonathan and Rowan are objecting to with the AI music, I think. Because nobody said the provisional tracks were bad. They weren't critiquing the product so much as the way I got it. Because, you know, AI doesn't have an inner wilderness to get lost in. As far as I know, it just has a map of everyone else's. I guess I was denying another artist the chance to make something only he could have contributed to this project. Or at the very least, I could have honored somebody else's completed journey by licensing human-made music off Artlist or something. I guess since I don't identify as a musician anymore, I didn't really think much of it. And I should have. I'm sorry. It was callous. I don't know. I guess I'm susceptible to that kind of callousness because my own work feels so singular. AI just doesn't seem to threaten the part of my process I actually care about. It just doesn't have the self that I am preoccupied with mythologizing, namely myself. And I think I've said this, the real work for me is not in the packaging, it is in the expedition. And the expeditions are in here. Yeah, this is where I have regular talks with the wild man. Yeah, that is the interior being that a lot of modern men have lost touch with. And before we go any further, I should say that I'm going to be talking mythically for a while, and I'm going to lose some people. That's to be expected. We inherited a lot of useful things from the scientific revolution, but once science became the dominant language for truth, other ways of knowing things kind of atrophied. We started to treat myth like it's synonymous with fiction, which, you know, that's not accurate. Myths are basically compressed psychological software. You know, human beings are innovators and explorers. It's in our nature to wander into situations we weren't designed for and to build environments that our instincts struggle to navigate. Our instincts just don't have the RAM for the complexity of the things we create. So our ancient ancestors made mythology as like a black box for patterns that we can refer back to in case we want to orient ourselves and remain recognizably human in an increasingly unfamiliar world. So yeah, when it starts to feel like modern life is suffocating your humanity or whatever, you can go back to some of these myths, assuming you have the patience to read. And sometimes they can awaken forms of understanding in you that might not fit neatly into the propositional framework that you've inherited from modern civilization. I guess the idea is that whatever keeps a story alive for thousands of years probably touches on something that's vital to the human experience. So yeah, in that sense, myths aren't trying to explain how the world works the way science does. They're trying to explain how you work with all your evolutionary baggage. If I start talking about kings and wild men and magic keys, I am not asking you to believe in fairy tales. I'm just asking you to temporarily suspend your commitment to literalism. And if that feels impossible to you, I don't know, maybe you should try practicing having a less rigid relationship with reality or something. Go outside, look at a tree for a couple hours. See if it reveals anything to you. And if it doesn't, at least you spent some time outside and got some vitamin D. All right, where was I? Okay, so the wild man is an interior being. He's one of 7 as recognized by Bly. And in recent centuries, the Western man has had a harder time accessing him. Part of the problem is he makes polite society uncomfortable, not because he's savage. Bly is very careful to distinguish between savage and wild. You know, the wild man isn't cruel. He isn't chaos for chaos's sake. And he isn't all bravado either. As Bly puts it, the kind of wildness or unniceness implied by the wild man image is not the same as macho energy, which men already know enough about. Wild man energy, by contrast, leads to forceful action undertaken not with cruelty, but with resolve. The wild man is not opposed to civilization, but he's not completely contained by it either. The ethical superstructure of popular Christianity does not support the wild man, though there is some suggestion that Christ himself did at the beginning of his ministry. A hairy John, after all, baptized him. When it comes time for a young male to talk with the wild man, he will find the conversation quite distinct from a talk with a minister, a rabbi, or a guru. Conversing with the wild man is not talking about bliss or mind or spirit or higher consciousness, but about something wet, dark, and low, what James Hillman would call soul. A lot of modern men opt out of integrating the wild man, probably because they correctly sense that he's not always great for networking, and these men end up repressing the wild man and then projecting him outward. He becomes this exiled figure, something they encounter less and less in themselves and more in stories. Bigfoot is one of the more obvious examples. I think artists probably encounter him internally more frequently than the next guy, true artists, and that's probably because the artist's job is to go off the edge of the map, enter unfamiliar psychic territory, and then come back with the evidence, the painting, the song, the overly ambitious podcast episode, whatever it is, and then, another person can encounter the evidence and be like, I've been there too. In that reoccurring dream I never admit to having. I thought it was just me. But it never is just you or me or anyone. That's why mythology is a thing. And, I've spent most of my adult life going into the wild man's territory, and we have a decent enough rapport, which is probably where a lot of this confusion came from, because I feel like, if you're in regular talks with an ancient, intimidating interior force, how could you not be a grown-ass man? A mere boy would probably shit his pants some of the places I've been. The thing that I was conveniently ignoring was the fact that you can be as grown-ass as is possible to be and still not be whole. And visiting the wild man from time to time just isn't enough. According to Bly, the wild man comes fully alive after a man does deeper work that isn't necessarily the art kind, confronting his wounds, tending the garden. And again, this is mythic language. Confronting his wounds, tending the garden, doing the kitchen and ashes work, bringing flowers to the holy woman, cultivating the warrior, learning to create, and receiving the second heart. And not to toot my own horn, but I feel like I've hit most of these beats, some of them literally. I mean, I worked in a pizza kitchen for years. I've examined my traumas to the point of airing them out online. I've examined the traumas that compel me to air them out online. I have brought flowers to women. I don't know that any of them were holy, at least not at the time, but you got to work with what you got. The point is, I recognize myself in the mythology, probably to a fault. I've probably drawn some parallels prematurely, because while yes, the artist's journey and the man's journey do overlap, they are not identical. I think I've always known that intellectually, but I needed to internalize it, and I'm trying to drive it home in this episode that the wild man can help me create all he wants, but he can't make me whole by himself. I was kidding myself pretending he could, probably on account of my relationship with another interior being, the Trickster, who I touched on in the last episode. The Trickster questions assumptions, bends rules, finds side doors where other people just see walls. He's good to have on your side, but the thing is, he doesn't just fool other people, he can fool himself and you. And I guess he's been fooling me into thinking that making honest art was the whole project, when it's really just a stepping stone. I think the reason the Trickster and I are so codependent at this point is because he came through for me in a big way early on. Bly says the first decisive movement toward male initiation is to leave the mother's world. And there's only one way to do that without the help of an older, competent male initiator, and that is to let the wild man out of his cage yourself. And to do that, you have to steal the key under your mom's pillow, and to do that, you have to embody the Trickster, which I did. It was pretty easy for me. And maybe you're thinking, well, shouldn't my father have initiated me? Isn't this on him? And the answer is no, not according to Bly. Even in traditional cultures, fathers weren't expected to oversee the whole process. You know, they were too entangled in the household, so other initiated men of the village were expected to drag you out and then help guide you to manhood. Then industrialization did away with a lot of that, and these days a lot of fathers, even committed ones, are unfinished themselves. So, I mean, they can pass on what they know all they want, but they can't reliably initiate someone into territory they themselves haven't fully inhabited, if that makes sense. Now, as far as your mom goes, mythically speaking, she represents your original world: safety, belonging, dependence, your first understanding of who you are supposed to become. And her job is to civilize you, but some moms try to take on the whole project of making you a man. And however well-intentioned that may be, if she ends up authoring your story, you know, you're going to grow into a version of yourself optimized for her peace of mind rather than your own becoming. And it shows. I feel like I can always tell when a man is walking his mom's path. And even if his own path would have led him somewhere less impressive or uglier or whatever, I don't know, the alternative just gives me the metaphysical ick. So yeah, you have to embody the Trickster, and you got to steal the key under your mom's pillow. And the pillow represents her dreams for you. It's where she stores her expectations of who you will become. And a lot of boys don't have the language for any of this. They don't have the mythological framework to build on. Just, you know, diluted superhero cosmologies that dominate the zeitgeist. And when they feel this overwhelming need to leave the mother's world, they can become insufferable in any number of ways. They can, you know, become edgelords. They can, you know, start calling everyone an NPC. Maybe they get seduced by grifters like Andrew Tate, Myron Gaines, or whoever else is currently capitalizing on spiritual fatherlessness. And I actually think the latter dynamic explains part of Trump's appeal. A lot of people weren't voting for a statesman with Trump. They were hiring a troll. They wanted somebody to offend the people they felt offended by. And that is a human impulse. It's just weak. It's not initiation. It's not manly in the mythic sense to subcontract your own rebellion. Yeah, you have to be your own troll if you want to initiate yourself. And it is better for everybody involved if you dress it up a bit. When you steal the key from under your mom's pillow, just try to show a bit of class if you can. Lean more George Clooney in Ocean's 11 and less Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern in Home Alone, if that makes sense. Because, you know, disappointing your parents can be a key step in becoming yourself, but why not try to make it look intentional? In my case, I had no problem stealing the key because, like I said, the Trickster took me on early. I started my creative rebellion young, disappointed a lot of people along the way. And while, yes, stretches of it have been pretty sloppy and embarrassing, frankly, I know that if I had to do it again, I wouldn't have gone in a different direction. But at some point, I myself got intellectually lazy. I called it a day, told myself I was initiated, and I guess I reasoned that if integrated manhood looks weird on me, it's just because I've spent so much time on the wild side. But, and I know I keep touching on this, but going into the wilderness is just one leg of the journey, and I guess I ended up spending the bulk of my time with just 3 of my interior beings, letting my relationships with the others go by the wayside. And the guys that I deal with on a daily basis are the wild man, the trickster, and the warrior. And yes, I do have a strong inner warrior that might not be obvious to the untrained eye, but you know, you don't spend 2 decades choosing art over stability without a strong inner warrior. This is from Bly again. It is the warrior that enables the human being to decide to become a musician only, or a poet only, or a doctor only, or a hermit only, or a painter only. It is the lover in a man or woman who loves the one precious thing and tells him what it is, but it is the warrior in Rembrandt or Mirabai who agrees to endure the suffering the choice entails. So yeah, the lover chooses the thing, the warrior agrees to suffer for it, and I have suffered. I know a lot of dudes, particularly on YouTube, assume things. There are a lot of like get a job comments as if I don't work full time to maintain this image of an unemployable artist. And you know, I feel for them. It's all projection. A lot of these men probably haven't worked an honest day's shadow work in their life. But maybe, I don't know, maybe they are on to something. Maybe they're right in assuming I haven't suffered enough. You know, but I have suffered in my way. I've worked degrading jobs. I've watched respectable lives drift out of reach. I've permanently lowered my market value in the eyes of people who use LinkedIn. You know, apparently I'm paying Jonathan royalties for a song I didn't really want. So yeah, my warrior is in good shape, but you do have to be careful. You can't let him get too much leverage because while yeah, every interior being contributes to the whole, each one has his own pathologies as well. And I know it's an exhausting prospect, but the idea is that by integrating all of them, you're setting up the appropriate checks and balances. You know, you got to know how to modulate in and out of all of them depending on the situation. So let's check in with the other guys and see where we stand right now. All right, here we got the king. Mine feels more like a middle manager. You know, every few weeks he'll pop his head in and ask whether I've renewed my car registration or contributed to my Roth IRA, or, you know, once he gets around to asking me whether I've eaten my vegetables, I'm like, you're just a middleman relaying messages from my mom. So I end up tuning him out and just waiting for her to call me. And here we got the magician. The magician and I do spend time together. He's the reason this episode exists. He's also the reason I'm an inefficient content creator. He's got very monastic sensibilities, and he's the one who wants me to promote the kinds of knowing that modernity deprioritizes. Like, he has no interest in 7 productivity hacks that nobody's talking about. He would much rather produce an hours-long documentary on why people keep wanting 7 productivity hacks that nobody's talking about. He's exhausting. Every time I read the comments section, he insists that I trace the comments back through Jung, mimetic desire, the collapse of participatory knowing after the Enlightenment, the history of Western consciousness, etc., etc. He's just incapable of having a small thought, and I love entertaining small thoughts sometimes. Like, why can't I have a normal, more relatable, intrusive thought when I'm trying to get cat litter at Walmart? Why do I have to think about the Gulag Archipelago, you know? All right, and then we have the Grief Man. I guess the Grief Man and I are on good enough terms. We just haven't talked in a while. I don't exactly look forward to connecting with him, and we never collaborate publicly. When something genuinely devastating happens, I tend to disappear into real life and let actual hands-on human beings carry me for a while. I feel like my online persona just isn't designed for that genre of human connection. And the Grief Man couldn't care less about content. Showing up is for funerals, not post-engagement. So yeah, by the time the audience realizes that I've suffered something big, my conversation with the Grief Man has already been translated into metaphor and edited for rhythm. It's pretty much highly stylized evidence that we had a conversation in the first place. Okay, the lover, he's a total idiot. He's the reason I chose art over becoming more employable. He cannot get enough of beauty, but his taste in women is it's confused. It's confused, if that's probably the more diplomatic term. I'm pretty sure my Trickster still has him locked in a sensory deprivation tank somewhere behind my left eye. I think he stuck him in there for my own safety, but yeah, I'm gonna have to let him out sooner than later. Because yeah, the lover doesn't just fall in love with people, he falls in love with life, with change, with the risks associated with change. And I have noticed something a little inconvenient of late, namely that it's becoming easier for me to be vulnerable on camera than off, which is efficient given what I do, but it isn't the correct approach to life. It's not the path to integration, because becoming doesn't happen in isolation. Humans become more themselves through their interactions with other people, unfortunately. So yeah, at some point the lover will have to come back online and participate in this project, which isn't just an art project, as Jonathan pointed out. whether he meant to or not. So the initiated man I'm trying to become is going to have to move between all of these interior beings, and he's going to have to remember that artistic practice is just one discipline in a much broader curriculum. Yeah, it's a lot. But in the meantime, let's check in with Jonathan and check out the final pass of this theme song that I don't want.
What's my deal? What's my deal? What's my deal?
So,
I mean, I guess I like that the lyrics are less intelligible now.
yeah, it makes you work for it. You know, I was trying to mirror the experience of engaging with your work.
Okay.
What else do you like about it?
Honestly, man, I'm not loving it. It's just not my thing.
Well, it's a good thing that you're not my audience.
Who's your audience?
Your audience is my audience.
Okay, and what am I?
A client. Or a brother in arms who lost his way for a minute. Take a pick.
Actually, could we do tribesman? That's an analogy that I've been using for this installment. And I like
Okay.
when things come full circle.
Yeah, okay. That works for me.
So yeah, like we can hope that the game that you brought back tastes good to fellow tribesmen, if not to me. The game is the song.
Okay, well, are we in the analogy, or
Yes.
are you saying that the audience is the fellow tribesmen?
Yeah, aren't they?
No,
What are they?
the weather. Sign that contract tonight, and this WAV file is yours. For now, I need you to go because you are cutting into my next person's session.
Oh yeah. What do you got going?
That's Rowan. He wanted me to call you when we were done because he didn't want to cross paths with you.
Yeah, why is that? Have you asked him why? I'd be interested to hear that.
Yeah, me too. No, I didn't ask him, and I'm not going to.
Why?
It's just none of my business, Alex. Now, I'm going to open up favorites on my phone because that's where Rowan's number is.
Okay.
Okay, you can go. I'm gonna pull up favorites, give Rowan a call. Yeah, he's leaving.
Actually, I'm thinking we hold off on the tribesman analogy. I don't know. I think that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening to What's My Deal.